Hello and welcome everybody. I hope y'all having a great day today. I was just sitting up super late of making a new video for you guys, but conveniently the patch notes just dropped a few hours ago and it's going to be update 1.13 that dropped on July 30th, coming with a whole slew of changes for both PvP and PvE. And I didn't expect this to come, but it came with a whole bunch of nice stuff that I think you guys are going to enjoy, and it's going to help shake up the meta a bit. So without further ado, let's get right into them. Starting off with our skills, we're going to have Savage Lion's Claw. This is going to have it to where the second hit of the follow-up attack is now easier to land, but it does come with the drawback of decreasing the damage animation of the first attacks against other players. So it's going to come with a pretty decent buff and a pretty decent nerf. And overall, I think it's just a fair change for the skill. I never found it too obnoxious to fight in PvP, and I didn't really get too worried about it, so I just feel like it's a fair change. Nothing good or bad to say about that one. Raging Beast is now going to have decreased invulnerability windows against other players, which I think, yeah, less iframes that do us all some good here, so I'm not mad at that at all. We made it, everybody. Jump out of your chairs and rejoice. We finally have it. Decreased invulnerability windows against other players' attacks while using blind spot, so hopefully people can't just blind spot spam you for the entire match now, and they actually have to use it at a good time, which would be great. Palm Blast is going to get a nerf here, decreasing the poison amount generated when charging up the skill, which is pretty straightforward, just less of a window to build up the poisons quickly. Spells and Incantation, Miriam's Vanishing is going to decrease invulnerability windows against other players' attacks. Previously, you were able to just chain invincibility teleports back to back to back, and now there should be a window where you can actually get knocked out of doing this now, making it just easier to deal with for people. For Knight's Lightning Spear, it's going to increase attack power on the initial Lightning Spear, but decrease the attack power of the spears launched after the first one, and it's also going to decrease the poise damage of all spears generated by the spell, which is just, I guess, is nice for the first hit, but everything else is just going to be getting the shorter end of the stick here, so this is pretty much overall a nerf, unfortunately, for anybody who liked using that skill. Moving on to the general balance adjustments, we're going to have increased damage animation of the light greatsword charge attacks against enemies other than players, so this is a PvE change. Increase the stats and status of the following NPCs that can be summoned in some arenas: Needle Knight Leader, Pureblood Knight Ansbach, and Tholier. Increase the attack power and damage negation of summoned spirits excluding the Mimic tier when the Revered Spirit Ash blessing is at 5 or more. Increase the attack power and damage negation of summoned spirits excluding the Mimic tier again when upgraded to +8 or higher. For armaments, we're going to have increased attack power scaling when upgrading the following armaments: Repeating Crossbow, Spread Crossbow, and the Rabbith's Cannon. Rabbith's Cannon is going to hold a special place in my heart since I just really think it's a really cool weapon to just have a heat-seeking missile, and now that it does even more damage, or at least scales a little bit better, that'll be even better. For the Shield of Night, it's going to have increased damage negation when blocking physical attacks. Europia increases holy damage when the weapon has its luster restored, decreases the number of attacks required to restore the weapon's luster, and increases the duration of the luster restoration effect, which is just all across the board buffs, and that should hopefully make the weapon a little bit better. For the Golden Lion Shield, it's going to have increased guard strength, which is always nice to have on a shield. Golem Fist added a damage hitbox to the hand portion of the ranged fist attack, which, yeah, we'll take it. That's even better. Finally, the Golem Fist will be on the map. Had a lot of people bummed out about how the Golem Fist was performing to an extent, so hopefully this makes it feel a little bit better to use. The Smith Script Great Hammer is going to have increased poise damage on the swinging portion of the throwing attack, but leave the projectile unchanged, so the swinging portion is just when you're spinning around with the hammer, it'll actually have a little bit more poise to work with, so hopefully that can be a pretty decent buff for you guys who use that weapon. The Spread Crossbow is going to have decreased generation of status buildup whenever you're using bolts that do have status effects, so that is just going to be an overall nerf. Moving on to the Ailment Talisman, after the onset of a status ailment, the status buildup or duration of said ailment will now also be reduced immediately by a certain amount, which this is just going to be a very nice buff to be able to have for this talisman. Now, whenever you do get a status effect put on you, it should go away a little bit quicker and you still get the full benefits of the talisman, so you really can't go wrong with it now, I feel. That definitely makes me want to run it a bit more. For the Clarifying Horn Charm and all of its variants, it's just going to have increased focus resistance, which is always really nice. For the skills, we're going to have Savage Lion Claw, which is going to increase attack power and poise damage of the first attack. For Swift Slash, we're going to have reduced movement distance when using the skill and extended recovery time, which, I mean, I'm sure you guys were tired of getting hit by Swift Slash, so I'm sure this is nice to see for anybody who is just dealing with that attack 24/7. Overhead Stance is going to have increased attack power against enemies other than players, so this is going to be nice for PvE. For aspects of the Crucible Wings, it's now going to be getting increased attack power alongside increased directional control, as well as an amount of poise generated when using the skills, which is just all around nice buffs, and you can't go wrong with it. I really like that Ash Award personally, so these are all really nice buffs for it. Light Speed Slash is now going to have it to where the additional light attacks are now affected by the attack power and ability scaling of the weapon, so that'll be pretty nice. Rancor Slash is now going to have increased attack power of the Vengeful Spirits and also increased stamina damage against guarding enemies. Revenge's Blade is going to be getting increased directional control for the follow-up attacks after a strong attack. Horn Calling is going to get increased attack power against enemies that are not players, so this is a PvE change. Horn Calling Storm is also going to get increased attack power against enemies that are not players. Weed Cutter is going to be getting an attack speed increase, which is just great in my opinion. That's probably the main thing that it needed. Romina's Purification is going to get increased poise value when using the skill, which that's the change I think everybody that liked that weapon was waiting for. So the fact that we have it now is a game changer. Red Bear Hunt is now going to have increased attack power, and it also increased the poise value when using the skill, so that's fantastic. Rancor Shot is going to have decreased status buildup generation whenever using arrows that do inflict status to begin with, so that's a pretty needed change for PvP in my personal opinion, or for the game in general at that. Repeating Fire is going to have adjusted attack power to compensate for the increase in weapon damage. Feeble Lord's Frenzied Flame is going to get reduced frenzy status buildup against enemies. Revenge of the Night is going to get increased poise damage and attack power when the skill is used immediately after guarding against an enemy's attack, which is a pretty nice buff for it. For spells, we're going to be able to get Glint Blade Trio, which is just going to have an all-around damage increase, which is just great for it. Blades of Stone are going to get a lot of changes here with adjusted attack power of the first, second, and third charged attack. Increased attack power of non-charged attacks, increased attack power of the first hit of the charged attack, and reduced the attack power of the second and third hits. And finally, increased attack range and attack speed. Also for Glintstone Nails, we're going to now get increased attack power and improved enemy tracking, which for a skill that was cheap like this and worked so well, this is probably going to be a pretty sizable buff for it. And then for Glintstone Nails, it's also going to have the same thing going on for it. For Impenetrable Thorns, we're now going to have all generated Impenetrable Thorns will now track enemies, which is just great for it. Decreased attack power and poise generation. And finally, decrease the hemorrhage status buildup and stamina damage against guarding enemies. Finally, Rings of Spectral Light are going to get increased attack power and frostbite status buildup. Vortex of Putrescence is going to get increased attack power and frostbite buildup, which is just really nice. I felt like the death sorceries were kind of lacking, and they do need some type of buff because they just don't feel too nice to use right about now, in my personal opinion. For the Minor Erdtree, it's going to get increased HP recovery amount, which is just fantastic. That's exactly what it needed. For the Land of Shadows, it's going to get improved enemy tracking. That's even better. Spira is going to have an increase to its attack speed, which is exactly what it needed too. These are some really nice changes right here. Watchful Spirits is going to have improved enemy tracking. This thing can be so annoying if you use it properly, in my opinion. So now that it can actually track on the people even better, I feel like that's a great buff for it and definitely something that you guys should check out now. The Divine Beast Tornado is going to have increased attack power. Enemies hit by the tornado will now be launched upwards, which is just fantastic. And the tornado is less likely to disappear due to collision. This was the main thing that I hated about this incantation, was because it was so cool to me, but it just hit walls and just evaporated. So now that they added that, that's a fantastic change. Rain of Fire now has increased attack power and reduced the interval between each hit. So that's just great. Quicker hits, more damage, more DPS. Great, I can't go wrong with it. Aurora Regalia is now going to have increased poise damage and attack power, which perfect, that's exactly what that needed. Furious Onslaught, surprisingly they didn't put the bleed proc on it, so I guess it just really isn't meant to have bleed, or they still haven't gotten around to it yet, but yeah, it's just gonna get more attack power, which is fair. Rotten Butterflies, even more Scarlet Rot build up for one slot, which is huge. Reduce the intervals between damage ticks, which is even better, another buff, and more attack range. Rotten Butterflies right now, and her weapon, everything for Romina or Romania, however you say her name, all great right now. These are looking good for the Saint of Bud. As for the Spirit Ashes, they all pretty much have the same thing going on, and it's a ton of them, but they go along the lines of either making the Spirit Summon a little less easy to stagger, or it outright gives them more status resistance, more defense, or more attack power right now seems to be the trend. I won't go over all of them, but I will quickly scroll past them so you guys can see all the different ones, and you can pause if you want to read a specific one that you like. Last but not least, we have the bug fixes, of which there are a ton of, so I won't be reading them out, but I will read the first one out before I start scrolling and showing you guys the bug fixes and everything else, which are pretty minute changes from here, but still. We have changed the default selection of the OK/cancel prompt that shows up when using the Spectral Steed whistle while the Spectral Steed is dead. The default selection position will now be at OK. And I'm sure we've all been there where you're trying to get back on Torrent in like a fight, like against a fire golem or something, and you just get, you just can't make it to the button in time. You just get completely wiped out. So I'm so glad they changed this, and I had no idea this was a bug. I thought that was just like their choice to do that, but I guess it was a bug the whole time or something. But yeah, I'm just glad they added that. But showing off everything else here, we have And yeah, that'll pretty much do it for the patch notes here. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys were most excited for out of all of these changes, whether it was for PvP, PvE, or bug fix or anything. I'm curious to know. And I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm super excited to try out all this new stuff, and maybe I'll even make some new builds around it and just see what's possible. But thank you guys again for stopping by and checking out the patch notes with me, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys in the next one.